I'm like, yeah, you're gonna have to do a little bit of job in that.
All right, let's hit the
Otherwise,
top.
Jackson may not survive the season.
Jack went out to 5 week 1. All right, good evening, everybody. Robin Hood's merry band of football men are here. Jay Kaplan, Anthony Strait, and Joe Tufaro, along with myself, Stephen Rabinowitz. Guys, in 30 seconds or less, and I stress the words 30 seconds or less, what does the NFL being back mean to you? Let's start with Joe.
Means I'm refereeing games every night, and I have no time to myself. But at least I have something to do on Sunday afternoons now.
Anthony?
It means the return of NFL Red Zone. It means Sunday afternoons of football, 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 and more Taylor Swift. Yay! I had to get the Taylor Swift reference out the way before we continue.
Yeah, you know that you know that there's that she's become a cross platform, to use a term of art in my own day job industry. She's become such a cross platform star that Rolling Stone's Instagram feed is publishing pictures of her entering the stadium tonight to watch Kelsey play. So that's what the NFL has become. I'm all for it. Keep it going.
Whatever. I mean, it's a good way to start this. It's a good way to get a void back on Sundays that it doesn't seem like you can have, and a way to get away from doing chores for 6 hours. Anyway, welcome to the On the Sports Lines
like
NFL
a honeydew list.
That is correct. Honey, I will do. Welcome to the On the Sports Lines 2024 NFL Preview Special. Last week, we talked about what the boys who play on Saturday will do in the rest of 2024. Now, this week, we talk about the men of Sunday and Monday and Thursday, whenever they want to play. The NFL does. It includes Friday this week, too. Yep. So let's get on with the new rules as us old people talk about it. Dynamic kickoff. 2 words that shouldn't go together in the English language, but for the first segment, they most certainly do. After 22% of kickoffs were returned to the 2023 season, and if I do my math correctly, math minor here, that's less than 1 out of 4. New rules were put in. Yes, that's why. Never mind. New rules were put in place to make the kickoff, well, an actual play. Let's talk about it and start with my partner in crime from the Official Review Podcast, debuting Monday with all new regular episodes. You're a proponent of this new rule, Joe?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I don't like the fact somebody made the point that, if you do kick it out of bounds now, 2 first downs later, you could probably kick a field goal. It's kind of a little bit penal for that kind of stuff. And I don't think it's going to do much. I think tonight they've just kicked it all in the end zone and they just come out. They give them the extra 5 yards. Who cares? Because it is a little dangerous now if you can't figure it out yet. I do think it's going to cause more holding penalties because when you're looking over your shoulder to see if the ball has landed yet, which is just a natural reaction, you're not going to hear anything. The guy in front of you has already started running by the time you turn your head back. And guess what? You don't want to be the guy to get beat. So it's actually going to probably cause a few more fouls in the beginning. And then we all know NFL coaches are smart and they'll figure it out and they'll have to change it again. So we'll see where it goes.
It's already dropped down a lot from the first few weeks of the season. It was at 80% week 1. Now it was pretty much 50% in week 3. Anthony, it's a different world out there when we're trying to make this an interesting thing, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just me or my days going back to playing special teams, but I kind of miss the days where returners were actually thought of as far as strategy. I mean, what happened to the Dave Megans and the Mel Grays and Brian Mitchells of the world, the Devin Hesters, or even Jay, you're still a fan. I remember Connor Lake back there returning kicks every once in a while.
Along
with Rod Woodson. I mean, it's the fact that I would love to see that it works out to where strategy has to be brought in. Maybe if you have a kicker, you don't want him kicking the ball out of the end zone all the time, and maybe force the returner to bring it out. But here's the thing too: if you're the receiving team, you kind of want your full 40 guys returning kicks, knowing that they're the only ones who can move once the ball's in the air So they get a running start on a short kick while everyone else is basically stationary until the ball is played. So I think it does bring some strategy back into it. But of course, tonight we've seen what 3 touchbacks already after a Super Bowl where there was 13
No
touchbacks.
returns no returns in the Super Bowl. Not
Yeah,
a single return.
so I think it's going to be so at least so far tonight that the results are inconclusive. We'll see how the rest of week 1 play out. But I would like to hope this work out in the fact that that the return game actually comes back into the game. We actually see the 3 sides of football that's always stressed out: offense, defense, and special teams. And wherever special teams nowadays, it's really mostly the kickers and the punters doing the jobs, but the return game has basically been obsolete the last few years.
Yeah, me personally, I'm intrigued by it. This is a radical change for the NFL, which is not something they're known to embrace, especially not something from another professional football league like the XFL. The new format with the coverage team and blocker starting 5 yards from each other. Granted, it eliminates the running start players had on traditional kickoffs that led to all those huge collisions and concussions and other injuries. And I understand the need to reduce those injuries, but over the last decade or so, kickoff returns have become the NFL's version of Major League Baseball's intentional walk with the ridiculous proliferation of touchbacks. Rabbi, as you said, 22% of kicks were returned last season. That is a record low. So I'm hoping, Anthony, I agree with you. I hope it brings the kickoff return back as an actual facet of the game. What I want to see is if we get to see any creativity coming from teams, with covering returning kickoffs in this new format. Special teams coaches are going to have to come up with brand new ideas, especially with double team and wedge blocking now allowed on kickoff returns, with the one caveat being that the second returner, which the XFL version did not have, becomes the lead blocker on the return team. He can't be part of any double teams. With the coverage team and return team blockers so close to each other, I'll be interested to see how much they borrow from offensive line blocking scheme. Apparently, some of the XFL return teams did just that. Apparently that, there was some creativity at the XFL, but the kickoff play was still very vanilla, did not have a lot of big returns. I think NFL tweaking the format to have 2 return men, and the NFL roster just in general having higher quality players could make things more interesting. Especially since the new format gives the return man more space, since the coverage team can't start until the ball is caught or hits the ground. But there's a chance that once the games count, fans won't see as much of a difference as they'd hoped for. We all know special teams coordinators are cautious by nature because any mistakes their units make become the worst kind of highlights on SportsCenter. According to reports in a conference call with reporters last week, Jeff Meller, who's the NFL's executive VP of Communications, Public Affairs, and Policy, got to be a shorter way for that title, said the league is happy with how things played out with the new kickoff format. He said 70% of preseason game kickoffs were returned. Most teams used the preseason to experiment coverages and strategies. It apparently did allow some players to show off their kick return skills to make rosters. NFL officials do think it's possible the percentage of returns will decline during the regular season. If tonight is any indication, we're already on that route. That rather than risk giving up big plays on kickoffs, teams will settle for the touchbacks, even though the new rules call for it to be placed at the 30 than the 25. I read something in The Athletic today that Diana Rossini, who's their insider, she was talking to head coaches and execs, and while they publicly supported the new rule over the summer, privately, they're not crazy about it. One NFC head coach said, quote, entertaining, yes, and the special teams gurus on teams like the Saints and the Cowboys will scheme the crap out of this and return everything, but a lot of teams are still going to kick touchbacks. I think you can expect a slight decrease in touchbacks, but slight. First big return against the team, they'll get scared and kick touchbacks. And an AFC GM put it this way. Teams will evaluate the drive start statistics and see whether it's worth potentially giving up a significant return or playing it safe. You'll have some teams that just say, screw it, and will kick the ball deep. There were some numbers that an NFC team ran, and the average starting field position after the kickoff return during the preseason was the 28.6 yard line. That's less than a yard and a half difference from kicking it through the end zone. Now, I hope this is not the case, but as I said at the top, this is a radical change for the NFL, which is not something they're known to embrace. So I will be a little saddened, but not overly surprised if, to paraphrase the Bard of Avon, this all amounts to a whole lot of sound and fury signifying nothing.
only Jay could do stats, then immediately finish his quotes with Shakespeare, immediately going in when it comes to kickoffs. I don't think this means too much to the whole grand scheme of things. The first return kick tonight in this Chiefs Ravens game, and the only return kick, I believe, in the first half, went to the 33. So that's actually losing 3 yards from what you gained at the end of the day. I think it's interesting towards the pace of play. I think it'll actually maybe speed up the game a little bit, especially more towards the end of the fourth quarter, because you want to at least have your team starting about 5 to 10 yards further down the field. But overall, it's just a real risk reward type of thing. And I don't think there's a lot of reward there for taking a little bit of a risk. I think the 30-yard, I think defenses are planning enough to stop offenses unless it's a really, really good offensive team that is just on a hot streak and you need to do something to get past them. But that's going to be a very interesting thing. Also, I hate the loss of the surprise onside kick, especially later in the game. It's stupid. It really takes away coaching gurus and stuff like that. And I do think one thing that's interesting to me is the fact that when there's other stuff that coaches might have to scheme for, managers complain, because I think a lot of coaching can be lazy these days out there, where people are either going for what a book says or what they feel. There's no in between, by the way. It's whatever the statistics say or whatever their gut feeling. You have a Brandon Staley on the left, who's now gone, thank God, and you have a Dan Campbell on the right. So overall, this doesn't mean too much to me. I really won't notice too much of a difference, but if anything means we have another 5 or 10 kicks return per game or per year, whatever. It's something that you have to tinker with something. You don't have to keep the same formula all the time. It's what baseball learned, and they have a more enjoyable game because of this. This is small change in a very, very, very wealthy bank. Let's just say that. All right. Let's talk with Joe as we go to the locals and ask how the offenses and defenses of the Jets and Giants will be productive and the most significant game among both teams' 17-game minefield. First up, the Giants. In 2023, they were 6-11, and the shine of Brian Daboll's 2022 Coach of the Year campaign became darkness. But there's still those 4 rings that you still kind of look over. Anyway, the over-under win total for this team is pretty much right at that same spot at 6.5. So, Jay, you're going to start with the offense because you were a quarterback back in your day. So who better? That's already 2 mentions tonight. So let's ask some questions about
Big appreciated.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so the Giants have a quarterback coming back from an ACL injury in a make it or break it season. A new running back number 1, replacing the one who has the 4th most rushing yards in franchise history. A rookie first-round wide receiver with OBJ-like skills and expectations. New starters on the offensive line. That's been an issue for a while now, to the point that the owner has called it out publicly, saying, quote, "It's ridiculous and it's a continuing source of frustration for me." And the head coach is taking back the play calling. Joe, with all that as backdrop, the Giants offense will be effective and productive if
the offensive line is as good as we think it is. Malik Neighbors is a real deal. He is just as good. He will, if he stays healthy, he'll live up to the LSU name of all those guys that, all of those guys that have come out of there. And he seems to be a little bit, I don't like the comparisons to OBJ because of OBJ's lack of work ethic and of those things and all the nonsense that he used to do on the sidelines. This kid seems to be the real deal as far as working hard, as far as putting in the time with everybody, spending time with the quarterback, not bad mouthing anybody, being really a good guy, almost a leader already in the wide receiver room, and being able to catch anything thrown anywhere near him so far in the preseason and in training camp. So I still think, obviously, it's the offensive line, because as long as Daniel Jones can feel comfortable, he can run only when he needs to or when he's called on to do. And he looked pretty good in preseason in the one game he played after he kind of knocked the rust off, as they say. I think he's going to be fine as long as he can start to trust the fact that he can stand in there and he's not going to get hit 2 seconds in, 3 seconds in, as happened in the past. So I think again, I know these questions and I kind of try to change them up a little bit, try not to give the too obvious answer, but I really do believe it's just
Sometimes
offensive
it
line
is.
at this point. It's the entire thing. They've upgraded at the skill position. They don't have to feed the one guy anymore, no matter what. And that means that the other team can't key on the one guy anymore, which we know has happened in the past. So I really do think it'll be more balanced. You've got Wandale Robinson, you've got Slayton, you've got Hyatt, you've got Malik Neighbors, you've got good tight ends, you've got, a couple of different choices at running back. I just think it's offensive line and how they gel together. And again, bringing in some veterans that made sense, that are real team leaders, really made a big difference.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I like the fact that not only, they basically brought in the entire right side of the Raiders offensive line last year, as well as the position coach. So even though these five guys haven't really spent a lot of time playing together, you've at least got one side of the line that already knows how they operate and already knows how their coach likes to operate. So I think that kind of makes things a lot easier on that line. And you've got, a long-time all-pro in Runyon, and you got an all-pro in Thomas. So, yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time, Joe, that the Giants had, the five nominal starters on the offensive line. You look at them on paper and you go, yeah, finally, right?
Yeah, no, and like you said, Jay, bringing in guys that they knew would be good, but the coaching change was key.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
they were awful and we talked about it late last year when I was on the show. We talked about how poorly they were coached and just watching them play, that they didn't really have a clue as to what they were doing. And watching preseason, hearing Carl Banks and those guys just watch those games and go, wow, these guys stay on their blocks. They push forward. Everything's always going forward. There's nobody running free anymore. Obviously they're going to get challenged every week because the NFL is the NFL. But again, you have a guy on the left side that already was solid. And now you've got center, guard, tackle on the other side that's solid. You've got a lot of depth in case somebody does go down. They've worked everyone at center. They've worked everybody at all positions. Illuminor came in and has played all five of them. Runyon's never missed a game. There's a lot of optimism there, and I think they made the right move. Again, I know you didn't watch Hard Knocks, but that was what Joe Shane said was, hey, we gotta give ourselves a chance. And the only way we give ourselves a chance is if you can protect the quarterback. So and the
Yeah,
only way to find out if the guy can play quarterback is if you can
right.
have him standing up.
And you talked about how Jones needs to feel comfortable when he's dropping back. And he didn't have that sense of comfort last year with the five guys in front of him. And especially this year, where we know that Dable wants to, return to the type of downfield aggressive passing attack he had with Allen in Buffalo. Now that Saquon's gone, and you don't have to, as you said, feed the one guy. And the only way Jones, who has steadily seen his air yards on, pass plays of 20 plus yards down the field drop dramatically from his rookie year. I mean, if he had enough attempts last year, his 6.9% rate would have been lowest in the NFL. In order for them to get back to that level, like up where around 20% where Allen was when Dable was over there, got to be able to give the quarterback time to throw. No matter how good Neighbors and the rest of those guys are, quarterback's got to have time to throw if you're going to execute a downfield attack like that.
Okay. Okay. I was sure Rabbi.
Hold on. I think it's more of the case of the chicken. It's more of a case of the chicken and the egg when it comes to will a good line holds up and will it make the quarterback better? We shall see. Anthony, now the defense.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were frozen up. I was like, wait for my cue. I was like, wait, is it still with us or? But anyway, the defensive side, the Giants obviously the biggest move in the offseason was to trade for defensive end Brian Burns. However, a new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, and along with some question marks along the secondary, raised some concerns for a defensive team that was solid at times but merely inconsistent last season. So, same question, but for the defensive side, the Giants' defense would be effective If
So here's the one that you can kind of change this up and you can take it one way or the other. The answer is either Tay Banks or Adoree Jackson. You either want to say, can Tay Banks still be as good as he was, and can he get even better and develop into one of the number one cornerbacks in the league so that they have to go to the other side because then you can protect that side? Or is it Adoree Jackson along with McLeod and Flott and those guys that can hold up so that it's more balanced that way. So I think it is gonna fall to the secondary. The fact that there's not this all-out blitz on every play from defense, or the fact that he feels like he needs to put pressure on guys all the time from every angle and from every level, is going to help them stay back there and play a little bit more normal defense. And I guess he plays a combination of man and zone so that the way it works out with the safeties and things. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together. I know he's a good coordinator, been very good in the red zone, very good against for points, those type of things. He's always been always been high ranked. But so you can take it either way, Anthony. It's either going to be Tay Banks has got to still be what he was, or does Adoree Jackson and Flott and McLeod and those guys, because I think Drew Phillips is going to be the real deal in the slot, and now you got Isaiah Simmons playing back there, kind of a hybrid spot. So I think the defense will be fine. Again, Dexter Lawrence, Thibodeau, Burns, and the rotating guy next to Lawrence will be the fresh guy that always comes in that they do a few tricks with. So, but it's definitely going to be the secondary. I don't think there's any question.
By the way, I'll ask you a question too, because I made the comment to some of my fellow Giant fans that losing Xavier McKinney will a bigger loss to the Giants than losing Saquon Barkley. And of course, people disagree with me. But there's a reason why I feel that way, and I wanted to ask you that question. Do you think losing McKinney during free agency will be a biggest impact on the Giants on a very young Giants secondary?
Yeah, I do. And that was, to me, that was the bigger loss for a couple of reasons, but it was impossible to pay him to keep him because he wound up being the highest paid safety in the league, which, God bless him. He figured out how to do that. He went at the right time. But when you lose a guy that played every single snap on defense, it's got to be more valuable than losing the running back that didn't play and, missed a few games and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of doesn't really affect you as much losing Saquon because you can replace him with downfield passes. You can replace him with a very good tandem of running backs, again, making the offensive line better. I think that the whole idea of losing McKinney was very difficult. But again, you couldn't keep him. It was impossible because they wound up making him the highest paid safety in the league. And again, Jay, you didn't see it. Joe Shane gets the message that McKinney's going to Green Bay, and he gets on the phone and he starts looking up. He goes, well, wait a minute. That puts him up with, oh, wait a minute. That puts him up. He goes, he's the highest paid safety in the league. And they're like, yeah, what we're going to do? We're not paying the safety $15 million.
No.
I'm not sure what Green Bay's doing, but Green Bay has a quarterback that they haven't paid yet. So they can move some money around and do some different things. I think it's a huge loss, Anthony. I agree with you 100%. And I would say it's bigger than losing Saquon because I think he was more of a leader on the field because he never came off the field on defense.
Joe, you mentioned Adoree Jackson's name, and the Giants basically, brought him back home, if you will, this past week. I mean, how do you read them bringing him back after basically letting him disappear for all of the offseason and then try to latch on somewhere else?
With guys like that who, it's almost like when Strahan decided he wasn't coming to training camp, right? For the year that they won the Super Bowl. It's almost like they all kind of agreed, like, we don't need him here all summer. Let these guys fight it out. We don't need the shadow of Adoree Jackson. Let's teach our guys how to do it. Let's bring in the young guys. Let's see what we can do. He said, I never visited another team. I don't know if my agent talked to anybody else. They got him back for $1.5 million with incentives. Nothing, zero money guaranteed. So he just wanted to come back and play. And he said, and he's kept himself in shape. He's worked out. He said, I worked football workout not just, going to the gym every day. So, which we all know is different, football conditioning versus regular conditioning. So he wasn't looking to retire, but he also didn't go anywhere else to look for a job. So I think this was always in the back of everybody's mind that
Okay.
they'd bring him back. And like I said, if Cordell Flott and McLeod and all those guys beat him out, they beat him out, they lose nothing. He's there for $1.5 million with zero money guaranteed. They could cut him in week 6 and that would be the end of it. So I think it's a smart move. And again, he's a veteran that knows the system. He worked with Shane Bowen in Tennessee. So he knows the system
Right. I
already.
forgot about that.
Right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't, they're all going, oh, can you start a guy week 1 that signs on Tuesday? And he goes, yeah, happens all the time, by the way.
Yeah.
During the season, right? Guys get hurt and you got to bring somebody up or bring somebody
Off the
in.
couch.
And he already knows the system. So what more could you ask for?
And the fact that it takes less pressure, it takes pressure off of Banks because he can go back to being number 2,
Right.
definitely gives him more room to develop with less pressure and expectations. I think it's a great move all the way around.
Yeah. No, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Yeah.
All right, so let's finish this off. Sorry for all the delays that we've had tonight. So I'll just simply ask you, this is going to be an interesting season for the Giants. I think this is a favorable schedule, but what is the most important game going forward for this team? I'll let you know my answer in a second, but Joe, I know you love to be put on the spot for these sort of situations. What do you think is the game that means the most to this team in this season?
You asked me this question last year, and you were wrong. I was right. But just so everybody's clear, if you want to go back to the archives and find it from last year, I was absolutely correct. I get it. It has to be. They played the Cowboys twice, both on Thursdays, which I hate.
Yeah.
They play them early. They play the Eagles late. They play them. It's really kind of an odd thing. I don't want to say Minnesota to start out with, but they almost have to get off to a decent start like they did 2 years ago, where they beat Tennessee the first day. They went for it on 4th down. They went for a 2-point conversion, all the stuff that they did to make it positive versus what happened last year, when everything went to hell on the first drive, just like happened to the crosstown team. And then they fell apart from there. So I think they really do have to play well, execute, and look like a complete unit coming out of the gate. So between that game, they also have such a strange schedule.
Yeah.
They play a lot of away games early. Like I listed my season tickets for sale, and I'm like, oh, I already sold the Minnesota game and I sold the Cowboy game. Oh, the next game is October 11th. It's like what's going on? Like the next game after that's in November. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. So, and then they have all those games in January that they don't even know when the date is. Against it, the Colt game still says to be determined.
Right.
Like they don't know when they're going to play. I'm like, I don't know.
It's either a Saturday or a Sunday now. So
Yeah,
at least
and
we
it's
have
sort
it.
of
At
like
least we have somebody
strange,
on a
but
timeline.
and all those games at the end seem to be winnable games. We got Tampa Bay. You've got a couple of different teams in there that are a little shaky, but I think they need to get off to a good start. So I'll go with that.
So
As do I.
Minnesota. Okay. Is that what you?
It's the typical Joe, 7 answers and 1 answer, and approval will be right afterwards. I really think it's that Washington game in week 9, especially if they start off well. If they don't start off well, then the answer is nothing. It's pointless, and this season's going to unfortunately be a wash, and it's really going to be, where do you go for the future of your ball club? And I don't know if that's how the Giants want to go, and I think you're still hoping for a hopeful season. And I think Washington can surprise. If it's going to be a tough division, and you're looking to get a possible playoff spot in that seventh seed, because that's where I think they ultimately would be.
Right.
I think that game against Washington, the second game against Washington is huge because that'll kind of determine order. That's my opinion, but it really does depend. Obviously, the first game is always the most important, but I do think it's such a long season that first game is treated as honestly a 4th preseason game for a lot of people, that I think that is the first game. You can't tell too much. It might mean a lot for some teams, but I don't know how much it means for all.
Rabbi, there's a part of me that thinks the reason that Joe went with the Vikings game to start off the season It's because he's anxiously looking forward to one more opportunity to trash Sam Darnold to all of us on the group text.
There's other. He can just move from trashing Sam Darnold to Aaron Rodgers. Speaking of, now on to the Jets, America's team of hope.
Let me
That
take
is
these off before I speak about the Jets, because they don't. I can't
yeah.
really either.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is time. It is time for the bias portion of that. Yeah, you have to lose at least all but one ring or wear a Namath jersey. All right, now on to the Jets, America's team of hope until the moment week 1 ends or my power goes out. Okay, now the Jets, America's team of hope until the moment that week 1 ends. That's what usually happens. They went 7-10 in 2023, despite quarterback Aaron Rodgers playing a grand total of basically a teardrop of the season, 4 plays before the season ended in injury. But there is a new hope going into 2024, and with the expectation of a healthy A-Rod, the over-under for this team is 9.5. I'll believe a double-digit win season is possible when I see it. But if you want even more skepticism on the Jets, let's have another round of questions for Joe. And the offense is pretty much the biggest name on the board, Jay.
Yeah, like their fellow MetLife Stadium tenant, the Jets also have a quarterback coming back from an injury, and Achilles in this case. They also have an offensive line that's been a serious bone of contention for a while now and has 4 new faces and 3 new starters. The big play free agent wide receiver they brought in was on the physically unable to perform list all of training camp up until this week, and their offensive coordinator is the definition of the word embattled. So, Joe, with all that as backdrop, the Jets offense will be effective and productive if?
Again, this is one of those that can go either way, right? So you can either say Aaron Rodgers, because after sitting for an entire year, never, playing whatever it was, 3 downs, 4 downs, whatever. I think I turned the game on late, so I only saw 2. So I don't know what it was, but I think it's the same thing. I think the offensive line has not really improved all that much. I know that the Giants outbid them for Runyon, and they outbid them for one of the other players, so they really didn't even go after it that hard, and yet they still sign all these, different players and all these other guys. They have, putting money into Riddick and all this stuff that doesn't make any sense when the guy doesn't even want to play there. But I still, so you can do it either way, Jay. It's either the offensive line or Aaron Rodgers, and it's the same thing to me. He's not getting any more mobile, especially after tearing your Achilles. You don't get more mobile. If anything, again, we've talked about this before. He stopped running 2-3 years ago. He's not going to get it. He's not suddenly going to turn into this, beast. And yeah, he'll be better throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson. He'll be better throwing the ball to a couple of these guys that they have that are very talented, but he still has to do it standing up. And that's going to be the big key. So take it either way. I still think the answer is the same for both teams. Whoever can protect them. And again, they won some games last year with Zach Wilson running all over the place. Again, if that's as good as you can protect the quarterback and it's Aaron Rodgers, that's not going to work. So He's just going to keep getting hit and getting hit and getting hit. And we all know he can throw one up every now and then also. So not many, but he does throw them up every now and then. So I think it's the offensive line.
Yeah, and I agree with you that just like with the Giants, the quarterback's performance is key, but it's tied to how well that offensive line allows him to throw. I was running numbers like I always do. And what I found interesting that last year, the Jets quarterbacks, other than Rodgers, 31st in the NFL completion percentage, 59.2. 30th in passing yards, 2,919. 31st in yards per attempt, 5.6. 32nd in touchdown passes, 11. 21st in interceptions with 15. Their passer rating of 70.5 was last in the NFL. If Rodgers stays upright for the full season and only puts up numbers similar to his final season in Green Bay, 64.6% completion percentage, 3,695 yards passing, 6.8 yards per attempt, 26 touchdowns, 12 picks, and a passer rating of 91.1. all of which would be career lows for a full season for him, that would still be an immense improvement over what the Jets quarterbacks did last season. Granted, the bar is very low, but it would probably be enough for the Jets to finally have an efficient offense, productive enough to pair with what should still be a stellar defense and somehow allow them to make some noise in the AFC.
Anthony, speaking of that stellar defense, you're up.
That was my setup for him.
Yeah, the defense obviously has been the backbone to the Jets the last 2 seasons, and to the point last season that even for me as a Giant fan, I kind of felt bad for this team having to do pretty much pitch a shutout just for the Jets to have an opportunity to win a game. And of course, we saw in many weeks, particularly that Black Friday game against the Miami Dolphins, that they bend, but even they eventually break if you have to stay on the field for too long. Now, fast forward to this preseason, Hassan Reddick, a guy they traded for the Philadelphia Eagles, is still holding out. They're still solid in the secondary with Sauce Gardner leading the way. But you got to figure at some point this defense is going to take a step back because they can't hold out forever, waiting for the offense to pick it up. So my question to you is the same as Jay about the defense. This Jet defense would be effective if
they can continue to get pass rush. The bad thing about the Reddick deal was they sent two guys packing that were at least playing, and they traded for a guy that doesn't even want to be there. So you lost out a couple of guys up there. And again, you can't just turn everybody back another year and expect them to have the best year that you just had. So I agree with you, Anthony. At some point, everybody takes a little bit of a step back. The other side of the field maybe isn't as strong as it was. Linebackers are all getting older. The guys up front are all a year older. And everybody knows what they are at this point, right? Because now it's been 2 or 3 years. So I don't think it's a particular person at this point that's going to make them better. I think it's a lack of depth that always hurts them. So I think it's if they stay healthy, if the front 4 or 5 guys stay healthy, then that team can still be really good because they need to put pressure on the other team. That's what makes the back end good. It's not the other way around, even though according to Sauce Gardner, he's the greatest thing since it's because they get pressure that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I think it's the front guys up front. If they can figure out who they are and continue to get better and continue to build, then they can have another good year.
Yeah, you mentioned two guys that they basically lost, and that was Bryce Hoff and John Franklin Myers, both to other teams. Look at the stats last year, 67 and 50 pressures respectively. I mean, that's good for guys who pretty much would be rotation guys on a defensive front line on any other team. But now you train for a guy who brings in 11 sacks, and he hasn't played a single snap all preseason, let alone been in the team facility because of a contract dispute. So yeah, that definitely raised some eyebrows if you're the Jet front office and you're training for a guy who you already knew you may have to pay at some point, but now he's not going to play along until you actually pay him.
And there was obviously a red flag there because you don't, if you're the Eagles and that guy was as celebrated and as good as he was, and that was so obvious of how good he could be, that you just let him go for nothing. There was a red flag there somewhere that he was a problem or he wasn't a good locker room guy or whatever it is. He obviously made it known that he believed his own hype and I must have been watching himself on TV a lot and listening to guys tell him how good he was because he wants to be paid at the top of the rung, and it's just not going to happen, especially not there at this point because they don't have the money to do it because they paid all these other guys. So again, it was a kind of a waste. And what did you do? You lost your depth. And, the greatest thing about having defensive linemen is being able to rotate them in and out and keeping them fresh. Now you traded away 2 depth guys to have a guy that's not even going to get in the stadium. So,
well, eventually it's the question of does he pull Le'Veon Bell and just hold out the whole entire season? I don't think that's an option in this case, but hold on. This is just something that I think that it's not the case of a bad organization. I think it's just really the case of it's just a misguided move. And I think that ultimately one man is not going to lose his entire team. Yes, you do lose the depth. Yes, you do lose that. And I think against some of the more fertile teams or more potent teams out there, like the San Francisco 49ers, we'll see this Monday, that might hurt. But I think going down in the trenches of the season, the bigger problem is going to be when he does come in, if he does come in, let's say, you're going to lose about at least 2 to 3 weeks, regardless of what happens. And, you know, a lot of players who miss that much time, who don't play during training camp or even don't play during regular season, they get injured quickly.
The provision in the CBA is, if I remember correctly from the Le'Veon Bell saga, is you have to play at least 6 games in order to be able to accrue your service time, and still, you know, and not lose an entire year's worth of salary. So worst case scenario, unless he's willing to forfeit an entire year's worth of salary, he will be back in at some point if it is up for only just the last 6 games of the year.
But I don't think the Jets are an organization that's going to be like, oh, you went to the Jets, we're so sorry. You played like crap you didn't really play too good over there. We understand. We're going to pay you exactly.
Oh, I honestly don't think they're going to pay him. You don't turn around and reward that type of behavior.
No, you don't. But you still have to at least hold out and finish that holdout sometime. I have a feeling that we're going to see him at least them come to something in the next 2-3 weeks because, again, can't really afford not doing it. I know they're paid rich in the NFL.
Yeah,
but we'll see what happens.
Joe Douglas did a really bad job of reading the room on that one.
It's a tough reading the room, that situation, but there were red flags. All right. Schedule time. I know you probably picked this one also earlier this year. I think it's the Week 7 game against Buffalo, and where they might actually have Aaron Rodgers for a whole game on a Monday Night Football versus Buffalo.
Week 6, Week 6.
Is that
Week 6, October 14th.
Okay, this is a great night for me in terms of being corrected every 5 minutes. So, with that being said,
it usually just on the other foot with you correcting me. So, you know.
With that being said, Joe, that's the game I'm looking at the most. What are you looking at in terms of what game is going to be the most important for the Jets? Do you think this Monday night game against San Francisco is going to tell a lot?
No. I think unless Aaron Rodgers gets carted off the field again.
Outside of that, of course.
I think I agree with you because I think Buffalo is that team that we're not sure what the hell they were doing in the offseason. And did they really think they got better, or were they just kind of figuring out a way to tread water for another season till they can come in? Because again, you know, it's one of those windows closing things. You know, the Jets think their window is. By the way, the Jets window was never open. It just got a little bit clearer so you could see through it. I thought it was open.
Well played, Joseph.
Yeah, you like that. I think Buffalo is at that point again. Trading your draft pick to the world champion so they could pick the fastest guy in the world makes absolutely no sense. And so you already gave the conference championship back to Kansas City by doing that. I don't know if they can win this division against these other teams that are up and coming by doing what they did. I don't understand what they did. I don't understand. I did watch them play, and it seems like they got Josh Allen a little bit more under control. So he's not just, you know, punting on third down by throwing the ball 80 yards down the field. I don't get it, what they did. So I think that is a key game because if they can beat them twice, we know they're going to lose to New England no matter what, because they always do. Then they can beat Miami once.
Not this New England team. Let's be fair here. Let's not insult them that much. All right. This is one of the worst teams to get it.
You can beat Buffalo and you beat New England, and now you can beat Miami once. All of a sudden, you do have a chance to be pretty good in your division. So
let's not insult Buffalo. Let's not insult New England.
You guys are probably right. I mean, Buffalo is you know, back in the day it was New England. This time of year, this time, you know, in time, it's Buffalo. The game that intrigues me is Week 4 when Denver comes to town and we get our first look at Bo Nix. I'm curious to see how he fares against this Jets defense.
I'm going to imagine that's good.
I can't really give you an educated guess because I have no idea what the Jet schedule is. I just went with Rabbi.
No. Ironically enough, I confused it. The Week 7 game is at Pittsburgh, so no wonder why. I confused.
Yeah,
it's a Sunday Night Football game. Why? All right. Moving on now. Let's get this show back on the road. On Wall Street, stocks are to be traded with care. Sometimes you want the best buy. Sometimes you want to buy the possible warning sign teams low and sell some blue chip teams high. Well, us four will advise you on which team stocks are up and the ones that are down. Sell, sell, sell before it's too late. We'll start with the AFC. Jay, you have the optimistic pick. That's coming up. And Anthony, you're first. Let's start with the team whose stock is currently down, and both of these teams are, spoiler, from the state that somehow needs to tell us how to spell its damn name to everyone, Ohio.
Yeah, yeah,
Well played, Rabbi.
yeah. I'm selling stock with the Cleveland Browns. And think about this: last year they were 11-6 with a point differential of -34. So that just tell you how abnormal it is to win that many games and have that kind of a bad point differential. But they also was 6-2 in games 7 points or less. And there was a couple of games that could have gone either way. You think about the comeback win against the Ravens and the game against the 49ers. Well, for whatever reason, the 49ers figured they'd take their Sunday off and lose that game. But when you got the Browns defensively, they're stacked. I mean, Jim Schwartz is back as defensive coordinator. And when you got a team that's led by Myles Garrett, who is a complete freak of nature in his zone, you're always going to have a chance. You're throwing to Darius Smith and Shelby Harris, and then on the back end of that defense, Denzel Ward, Grant Newsom second, and Martin Emerson Jr. This is a solid defense, and the defense really pretty much carried the Cleveland Browns all season. The question is on the offensive side, and that's where I look at this team as like, yeah, there's no way they're going, for whatever reason, a lot of prognosticators have them winning 9 or 10 wins. I don't see them winning that many games, mainly because everything revolves around the health of Deshaun Watson, who really hasn't been a healthy quarterback in with the last few seasons. And the last game he played was that comeback win against the Ravens. This is a Cleveland Brown team that cycled through 5 quarterbacks last season, including a Joe Flacco, who was sitting on the couch eating Doritos at one point and somehow managed to get this team back to the playoffs. On the offensive line, they're getting Jedrick Willis Jr. back and Jack Conklin back from injuries. But Nick Chubb is not going to play the first 4 games of the season because he's coming back from a very, very devastating injury that happened last year in Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football. So and you have a team that has 13 players on the roster, on the active roster, that's 30, that's at the age of 30 and over. I mean, this is a team and an organization that gave away quite a bit to win now. I just don't know if they're in that situation that they can win right now. You're already in a pretty tough division. Well, the Bengals can turn it off and on. The Steelers are never really out of it, no matter how much of a question mark they have at quarterback. And like I said, it's a tough division. Of course, you have the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson in that same division. So when you look at the Cleveland Browns, and Joe, we've seen this with the Giants the last 2 seasons. Remember the year they made the playoffs? They made the playoffs. They won a lot of close games, and that was such a big difference in that 9-7-1 record we saw last year. And we always see this time and time again. When you find ways to win close games one year, the next year things don't exactly go your way. And I can't see the Cleveland Browns finding a way to win these close ball games when you don't know who's going to be your quarterback from one week to the next. The offensive line is still somewhat of a shambles, and your star running back is not going to play. And there's just so many question marks on the offensive side. I don't think this defense, even with Myles Garrett, can hold up for so long the way they did last year. Keep in mind, their inconsistency when they weren't able to force turnovers, and we saw in that playoff game against Houston, when they can't take the ball away and you're able to actually protect a quarterback, they're pretty pedestrian. And the Texans got big plays. CeeDee Stroud just lit them up from the second quarter on in that playoff game. And it does raise some eyebrows if this defense don't take the ball away and can't get to the quarterback, which is what they were so good at last year. Just how good this team going to hold up. I'm definitely selling on the Cleveland Browns. I see them maybe 7 wins at most, maybe 8 on a generous. being generous about it, but it's just way too many ifs on the offensive side of the football for this team to really be taken seriously as a contender coming out of the AFC North.
And you didn't even mention Deshaun Watson, by the way, who I think is by
Oh no,
far.
I did.
You did in the beginning,
I
but
he's the biggest question mark by far.
There's so many question marks on this team, and I think even though Watson did have a lot of a winning record this year, by the way, internet's been cutting in and out tonight, so please forgive me for all of my transgressions. But I think that's really the key to this whole thing. If there's any team to finish under 500 in that AFC North, it's them. The other team in orange in the AFC North that was in last place last year looks like, as long as with a little bit of health, can get right back there.
Yeah, I know it's a potential captain obvious choice, and there is more to it than just quarterback Joe Burrow being healthy. But in a quarterback-driven league, having a franchise player at the position, Burrow is one of only 3 Tier 1 quarterbacks per the 2024 survey of 50 NFL coaches and executives by The Athletic's Mike Sando, along with the other captain obvious, Patrick Mahomes of Kansas City and Josh Allen of Buffalo. It's a reason for the Bengals stock to trend upwards, but the numbers don't lie. In the 2 seasons, 2021 and 2022, where Burrow played at least 16 games, the Bengals went 22-10, made the AFC title game each season, going 1-1 against the Chiefs. Burrow completed 69.3% of his passes over those 2 seasons. He averaged 4,543 yards passing, 34.5 touchdowns against just 13 picks per season, with an 8.1 yards per attempt and a passer rating of 104.2. He was the 21 comeback player of the year after returning from a knee injury that limited his rookie season to 10 games. Will history repeat itself? Injuries to his calf and wrist limited him to 10 games last season, and he was healthy for about 5.5 of them. The silver lining of those injuries, somehow the Bengals still managed to go 4-3 without Burrow, is that they get a 4th place schedule this season, and it's the 5th easiest in the league. They play the likes of New England, Washington, and Carolina all within the first 4 weeks. They also get the middling Raiders and Broncos, both at home. And inside the AFC North, they get the Steelers and the Browns, as Anthony just said, both of whom are question marks due to uncertainty surrounding their quarterback situations. Russell Wilson and Deshaun Washington are the epitome of Tier 3 quarterbacks, defined as needing a heavier running game and or defensive component in order to win. Speaking of those quarterback tiers, the Bengals play 7 games against Tier 4 quarterbacks, ones who are either unproven or shouldn't be starting 17 games. That's tied with the Chargers, Jaguars, Bears, and Falcons for most in the NFL. Overall, the Bengals play more games against Tier 3 and Tier 4 quarterbacks, 4 against 3s, 7 against 4s, and that's 11, than games against Tier 1 or 2 quarterbacks, 1 against a Tier 1, 5 against Tier 2s, 6. Yeah, the Jamar Chase contract situation's been a distraction all summer, and we may not know if he'll be in uniform on Sunday until moments before kickoff. But Zach Moss, who came over from the Colts after leading them in rushing, 794 yards on 183 carries, 4.3 a pop, 5 touchdowns, had 27 catches for 192 yards, 7.1 per catch, and 2 touchdowns through the air. He should easily replace the departed Joe Mixon as running back 1, and Chase Brown is solid as both a runner and pass catcher as running back 2. And if T. Higgins has to be wide receiver 1 for a spell, the Bengals should be able to manage, as they may have this year's Puka Nacua in Andre Yosevich, the second-year wide route out of Princeton, who was actually better known in college for being an All-America heptathlete, had 15 catches for 116 yards and 4 scores last season and had a hell of a training camp. Bengals put the 6'3", 205-pounder with his 4.43 speed in the slot on day 1, and he did everything necessary, such as regularly beating nickelback Mike Hilton in practice and scoring the lone touchdown by the first-team offense in the preseason on a 23-yard crossing route against the Bucs to claim the wide receiver 3 spot behind Chase and Higgins. And then there's the defense, which hasn't been since he's calling card in a very long time, and it probably won't be this season either. But if Lou Anarumo's unit can improve enough from the one that was 25th in the NFL in EPA per pass, 30th in yards allowed per rush, and 30th in rush defensive success rate, and Law's defensive tackle DJ Reader, their number 1 run stuffer, they won't be a net negative. It starts with a change of scheme in terms of how they'll utilize the defensive line, relying on disruption, specifically from veteran defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, more than holding the point of attack. And having linebackers Logan Wilson and Jermaine not Pratt not only fill the open lane, but also the one opposite of whichever direction Rankin wins. The 3 teams they open the season against will likely feature a heavy ground game, so this new scheme will be tested early. The reasons for hope on this defense lie in the secondary. Dax Hill moved from safety to cornerback in training camp, and it seems like the third-year player has finally found his home, and he'll be starting opposite Cam Taylor-Britt on the outside with Hilton as the nickel. And then there's the return of strong safety Von Bell after a year away in Carolina and his new partner at free safety, free agent acquisition Geno Stone. Pratt said hearing Bell and Stone constantly talking and working through every adjustment was music to his ears, starting it with OTAs this spring after the disaster that was last year's secondary. Anarumo says about Bell, quote, he's a calming factor for our defense. And Bell fully believes his return alone will improve things. And the numbers say he may be correct. Carolina was 4th in yards allowed despite going 2-15 since he was 31st. Carolina finished 9th in explosive play rate. Cincinnati was dead last, allowing 40 more explosive plays than Carolina. Bottom line, guys, with the schedule they play, if Burrow plays the full season, if Chase is back in the lineup sooner rather than later, and the defense improves the way Bell thinks they will, he says they'll be top 5 before his second tour of duty and since he is through, then there's every reason to believe the Bengals can challenge the Ravens to be the king in the North.
King of the North, yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would actually want to say about that team is...
Rabbi, the actual quote from Game of Thrones.
Was it King of the North?
The North, yes. In the last...
King of the North. Okay, that's fine. You also said, well, let's not get into correction battles here. We'll go all night because I make so many clubs, it's ridiculous. One thing I do want to say about the Bengals, though, is that Jake Browning did a pretty good job, an admirable job for Burrow last year. But again, that you're going from a tier 1 quarterback to a tier 4 quarterback. I can't believe that poll didn't have Lamar Jackson as a tier 1 quarterback, but
yeah,
I understand. How many more MVPs does he need to win to become a tier 1 quarterback?
It's not about that. He needs to win in the playoffs before they'll move him up. We talked about it on last year's playoff show, Rabbi. That's the one ding on his resume. He does not win in the playoffs, especially against Mahomes.
The only one problem is neither does Josh Allen. So there's also a fair question on both of them. Well, Dak Prescott's definitely not a tier 1 quarterback. That is for damn sure, but he's definitely in the tier 2 category. For some, he might be in the tier 7 category, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. On to the NFC, that conference that's not currently owned by Patrick Mahomes, LLC. Another wild year of the senior circuit. I think I can call it the senior circuit. It has been around longer.
Yeah,
so
you can.
Whatever.
You can.
Just like normal, Joe, you want to leave the good and take it back and talk about the facts of life in the NFC. Whose stock is down in 2024?
So I picked the Cowboys.
Surprise.
Yeah, not too surprising, but again, I remember Anthony asked me 4 or 5 years ago if I thought Mike McCarthy was going to be the answer to get them over the hump and get them into the playoffs. And my simple answer was no. And I stand by that answer to this day. Because again, I think the McCarthy watch is on. I think the Dak Prescott watch is on, or the Trey Lance watch is on, because if they don't play well for the first 6 or 8 games, this is Jerry Jones smoke and mirrors. This is we're in it for good. We're gonna go for it. We're always in it fully. And then they did nothing. They did nothing in free agency. They didn't have a great draft. They usually find some players somewhere. They didn't trade for anybody. They brought back Ezekiel Elliott to be a running back after losing Tony Pollard. Yeah, you have a very good secondary, but now they lost some guys there, so they don't have a lot.
Deron Bland getting hurt really hurts.
That's going to hurt him for the first part of the season.
Yeah.
Because especially when you get hurt late, that, Jay, when somebody gets hurt the week before the first game, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, now what do we do? So again, and after the CD Lamb thing, after we saw them in the playoffs, somebody was on yesterday, and again, I don't pay much attention, but there was somebody on yesterday going, oh, that really scares me because of their chemistry. And I'm like, chemistry? Did you watch the playoff game last year where they couldn't figure out, even if they were on the same team, and they wouldn't even talk to each other at one point? So, And then CeeDee Lamb decides he's not even going to come to camp for a while because of his, because of his contract. So again, I don't see this team as gelling. I don't see this team as being any good. I think, again, this division is starting to go back to being a little bit weaker because I don't think the Eagles are obviously, again, talking about a window closing.
I think that window is closed.
I
I honestly think the opposite of you. I think the Cowboys will be fine. I think the Eagles, the way they ended last season, I'll let you finish with the Cowboy point just a second. I think the way the Eagles ended last season is, if you think the Dallas Cowboys had some bad chemistry, the Eagles flunked chemistry, got an F, and have really not solved that problem at all.
Well, it's going to be, they brought in two established new coordinators with established resumes elsewhere.
They did.
So I think
but
Sirianni may actually be able to survive this season, but
here's the problem, though, and I'll just throw it back to Joe at the end of it. Cowboys got rid of Kellen Moore, and last year their offense got better in Dallas. The Chargers' offense got more predictable and one-dimensional. But Joe, just to finish on your Cowboys point, they do seem having a lot of red flags.
And what I was going to say was, I think the entire division, because even though you say, okay, I think the Cowboys play a little bit better because the Eagles are going to drop off. Well, Washington will get a little bit better if the quarterback can play. But again, he's not going to be good in the first 3 or 4 weeks. He's going to struggle somewhere in this thing. He's not going to go out and be undefeated. So it leaves the thing open to that division being back to the 9-7 teams and the 10-win teams. I don't see anybody going above that at this point. And they're kind of getting back to that NFC least part where they're all trying to do it at this point and see who can come out of that, because Washington's getting better. Dallas is dropping down. Philly is dropping down, but Dallas, can stay where they were. They'll be good. And then if the Giants can come back a little bit and make some noise, I think they all go 3-3 against each other. And it's going to be a matter of how they play the rest of the schedule. So that's all I was going to say. I don't.
And Joe, Dallas also has the division
winner
winner curse working against them, right? Dallas also has that not going in their favor.
No, they can easily
in the NFC East.
But they could easily trade that off with Philadelphia. I would put some eyes on Washington, though. I've said this before on a couple of things. I think they have a lot of good things building over there. They just need Daniels to kind of make moves and kind of be a rookie of the year candidate, and really just be kind of almost like what an RG3 was in season 1 for Washington.
All I know is this.
And I think that's I think that's what evens it all out, is what I'm saying, is they get a little bit better. The Giants are better than they were last year. The Eagles come back down. The Cowboys stay right where they are, but they may be in first place if they just stay right where they were. So I think
they can.
Better.
I'm looking forward to a week NFC East and seeing 8 and 9 wins winning the division. That's gonna be so much fun, isn't it?
No, it's not. And honestly, it's gonna be how it is. They're all their matchups get broadcast very, very quickly on national TV. One thing I would say is be careful, because the NFC South still exists, and in the vacuum, that is not a good division. And so there's still a lot of wins that the NFC has to have. So that's all I'm saying. But speaking of teams with rookies, I think the Bears are stacked this year, and I think this is the NFC North is going to be as good of a division as the AFC North, minus Minnesota. But I think what you've seen in Chicago, I know we can talk about what Justin Fields was in Chicago. He was serviceable. He didn't have a good offense around him. And yes, he had DJ Moore, but they didn't really have a plan around him. Oh. I don't know if Chicago was ever ready to give him a plan. Now, they got a lucky break. They got pretty much a gift from the heavens in Carolina giving them the number 1 pick. Because if they are not available to get Caleb Williams out of USC, who has shown some good promise in training camp. And I think even though I still think interceptions could be high for him in his rookie year, I do see a lot of leadership qualities out of Caleb Williams. This team has had an opportunity to draft the franchise quarterback, and they got that franchise quarterback, and they have franchise weapons for him to throw to. DJ Moore had a very good season with, again, a tier probably 4, if not 5 quarterback. I think I figured he's a tier 4, but I feel like there could be lower tiers for quarterbacks in Jay's world for people like Justin Fields.
Hey, it's Mike Sando's world. I'm just visiting and passing on his info.
Optimistic Jay could probably 6 or 7 at this rate if that's the case. But I would say that Chicago has a very good opportunity here. Keenan Allen, like I said, DJ Moore had a very good season in his first year in Chicago. Keenan Allen now is going to be probably a number 2, possibly even number 3 wide receiver on this team.
He's a pro.
He is a pros pro, he is older, but again, if you put him in the slot, my God, you have Rome Odunze from Washington, who is coming in, and he is going to provide an instant spark to the team. You get DeAndre Swift in free agency, who's had serviceable years in Philadelphia and in Detroit.
Bears really wanted him. They went out of their way to get him.
Reminds me a lot of what David Montgomery brought to that team in Chicago, and Detroit is now reaping the benefits of him as well. So you got all of that, and I think that's going to lead to a top 10 offense. And then on the other side of the ball, you had some really good youthful defense. Not the greatest defense in the world, but you got the Montez Sweat deal last year from Washington, who was trying to build some stuff down and get pieces for the future, and it worked. It really worked. Sweat had a very good second half of the season. Now he comes back. You have tackles on the offensive line that are improving. You have a secondary that rose from 30. You have a team that rose last year from 30th against the run to 1st against the run. A secondary that had 22 interceptions last year that was tied for 1st. Jalen Johnson, according to Pro Football Focus, was a top 5 quarterback last year, still top 5 going into the season. You have Eddie Jackson in the backfield. You have a lot of talent on this Chicago team. The problem is it's a very tough division. So even if Chicago's stock is going up and they may be an 8 or 9 win team, that still might not get to the playoff spot. I think it will. Honestly, I think that they will be probably. They could sneak in as a 6 or 7 seed as well. The NFC is stacked. Like you have the NFC East is a little over here. The NFC North is here. The NFC South is not even in my frame. And then the NFC West is a little bit higher too. A lot of good teams.
Get the NFC West this year, Rabbi.
Yeah, they do. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem. But I do think, though, Bears are going to surprise some people. And I think they're a 9 or 10 win team possible if everything breaks right.
I agree with you, Rabbi. You talked about Caleb and, you're concerned over whether interceptions are going to be a thing with him. And they will, because as Joe will tell you, not only do, rookie quarterbacks get hurt, they also throw a lot of interceptions, right, Joe? The thing with Caleb is that he got so used to playing off schedule at USC is that playing on schedule is almost foreign to him. And one of the things, the fine line that the offensive staff in Chicago has had to walk is not taking Caleb's creativity away from him, but at the same time, getting him to stay more on schedule. In other words, let the play develop before he starts to do his Patrick Mahomes act or, his Caleb Williams act. Because the way their offensive scheme is set up, he should be able to play on schedule and get the ball to the receivers that he has without having to, run around for 10 minutes back there waiting for somebody to get open. So if he can stay on schedule and play within that system that way while still having his creative moments, I think they'll be the better for it. If he spends too much time running around back there, the interception total is going to go up.
I think you almost have to expect them to be at a middle to high rate, because I do think that you need to see what Caleb Williams' floor is before going any further. I don't think it's going to be.
No, he's coverages and blitzes he didn't see in the Pac-12.
Yeah, it's all the that's right. I'm an LSU fan. I can't make fun of USC quarterbacks this week. It's
not this week. You can't.
No, not this week. Not this week at all. Miller Moss is a beast, but that's another day for another time. We have shitty defense at LSU. All right. Despite being the unquestioned GOAT of the world of the NFL, at least for quarterbacks, but maybe possibly for all positions, 7-time Super Bowl champ Tom Brady is officially trading in his TB12 meals. Actually, he never trades those in, so let's just say what he's doing now, possibly dating a Brazilian supermodel to have his age. Anyway, he's doing all of that for a mic as part of Fox's #1 broadcast team giving analysis. This despite restrictions that the NFL came out with last week, saying with a possible future ownership stake of the Raiders that he's looking for, there are things that he can't do. We'll talk about that all in this segment. Before this Sunday's Cowboys-Browns tilt kicks off, which is the only doubleheader in week 1, all to show us Tom Brady to the world, let's do what a lot of America wants to do. Criticize Tom Brady before he even says a word. Anthony, you get the first shot. I need comments.
I think Tom Brady for year 1 is going to do fine. He's going to have his what's the new button moments as any rookie TV analyst is. And granted, he's got a tough act to follow because Greg Watson was phenomenal.
My God, he was terrific.
Has the lead analyst for Fox, and we saw that the last 2 seasons. And well, I'm confident with Tom Brady is he's not far removed from being in the locker room. I mean, that's one thing that he has the advantage of. Most of the NFL he's played against pretty much, so that gives him somewhat of an insider take on what's going on in the locker room and on the field as far as strategy. And also, we saw with Tony Romo his first year. He's pretty much a guy stepping out of the quarterback room. So don't be surprised if he's called out plays and formations before it actually happens. Because, hey, look, Jay, you and I, we were football players, we were athletes, we're creatures of habit. And those things, some things just are instant. They just don't die. But also, I do think he's got working with Kevin Burkhardt, obviously. Me knowing Kevin Burkhardt from the SNY, covering the Mets for so many years, and transferred over to Fox #2, and now #1 play-by-play guy, Tom and all the area. So he's going to have a nice veteran crew to kind of ease him in. Mm-hmm. And obviously a great matchup with Dallas and Cleveland, 2 teams we pretty much already talked about in the last segment. But he also gets a Super Bowl, so he is under a heavy microscope for year 1. I do think Tom Brady is going to be very interesting to hear what he has to say. If you follow him on social media, he does have some occasional football takes that does draw some positive reviews and a couple of eyebrows too. So I can see that transferring over on the air as well. I think Tom is he's obviously a charismatic guy. Rabbi, you saw the Netflix roast of Tom Brady.
I did.
He does have a sense of humor, so that's a plus as well. And he also gave a shout out to his former coach, Bill Belichick, who joined Instagram. I mean, he's actually joined the 21st century.
Or as he called it in his post, Instaface, to try to be funny.
Yeah, so I think Tom Brady for year 1 is going to be fine. Jay, I'll set you up with this. I don't know how it's going to be long term, but for short term, I think he'll be just fine. And I'll let you take the long term ramifications of a Tom Brady lead analyst career.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could be good, but I don't think he plays out his contract. And I think that the constraints, his ownership situation, what it'll put on him will partly be why. Look, we know what happens when you doubt a guy drafted 199th back in 2000. So I'm not going to bet against him. He spent the past year putting in the work. Not surprising. We know his work ethic is legendary. He was studying lead analysts like Tony Romo, Troy Aikman, and Chris Collinsworth. How they did the job. So he's trying to get a sense of what it takes to be a good analyst. And according to sources, he has been meticulous about understanding the process. He got in practice reps by calling old games at the Fox studios. He also had multiple conversations with Brad Zager, who's the executive producer for Fox Sports, with Kevin Burkhardt, who will be his play-by-play partner. As Anthony, as you said, one of the best in the game. And Richie Zions, who's Fox's game producer for the #1 broadcast team. Brady asked about how much producers talk in your earpiece during a game or what a director does. he also made a point of going around each room to try and learn the name of every person on the crew. Look, he's called 2.5 live NFL games this preseason. He did a half of the Chargers Seahawks game in early August, followed by the entire Rams Cowboys game. And towards the end of August, he did the 49ers Raiders game. He's come a long way by all reports, but we won't really know about him until Sunday when he calls his first regular season game, is how much he still has to learn about the timing and flow of a game. He has a small window to get his analysis in between plays. And as Andrew Marchand, the senior media columnist of The Athletic, wrote in his piece on Brady this week, quote, "What the average fan needs to understand is different from what a quarterback trying to win each down needs to know. To use quarterbacking parlance, Brady has worked to make his progressions quick while displaying personality. He's learned the mechanics, focus on making 1 point instead of several at a time." Though Brady himself admitted he still has a way to go, balancing the whole, looking at it through the view of a quarterback as opposed to looking at it through a view of a guy who's trying to say, hey, let's have a great game. Look, we all know how obsessed Brady was with the game as a player, so I think that will translate eventually to him giving viewers a good broadcast. But I do think, at least initially, that the restrictions on him while his limited partner ownership with the Raiders gets sorted out by the NFL will be a detriment to him, despite Fox seeming very unconcerned about it. Here are the two major restrictions as reported by ESPN. Brady's immediately restricted from accessing other teams' facilities and practices, as well as broadcast production meetings, which usually include meetings with coaches and players ahead of games. Granted, any questions he'd wanted to ask, he can do over the phone with said coaches and/or players, and the rest of his broadcast team, Burkhardt, Aaron Andrews, Tom Rinaldi, they'll be able to relay any and all relevant information they get in those meetings. So from that standpoint, yeah, Fox doesn't necessarily have to be overly concerned. Here's the one that I think they shouldn't poo-poo. Should Brady's part ownership of the Raiders be approved, he would also have to follow certain NFL policies in place for owners. Specifically, he can't publicly criticize officials and other teams. He could be fined or suspended if the league deems he broke that policy. He would also have to adhere to the league's gambling and anti-tampering policies, and he would be limited to strictly social communication with members of other teams. To me, that kind of gets in the way of doing your pre-production job. I know Fox signed him to this 10-year, $375 million contract while he was still playing, with the proviso that he'd automatically be assigned to their number one broadcast team, sight unseen in terms of his ability to do the job, unheard of for a rookie game analyst, and left it open as to when Brady would start once he stopped playing. Though I believe the thinking was that it would be this year, since Fox has the Super Bowl and they want him to call it. Again, unheard of for a former player with zero experience calling games. But I think that becoming a part owner of an NFL franchise, along with his other myriad of other interests, are why this won't become a full-time second career for him, as it has for a lot of former players. I'll be surprised if he does this for even 5 years. Anthony, I agree with you. I think he'll have moments this season that remind us of Romo's first year in the booth, where his unique insight into the game teaches the viewers something new about the game, which is what they're tuning in for. But I also think he'll have moments where the four of us will be texting each other that he has no business being in the booth for the top game on the Fox Sunday slate, either due to his inexperience, having to be mindful of what he says due to the restrictions related to his ownership situation, or both. Brady's rookie season in the booth for Fox will bear as much watching and scrutiny as Caleb Williams' rookie season on the field for the Bears. But as always, with any rookie, especially a quarterback, what I'm interested to see is if they take the leap in year 2. I figured TB12 will stick around at least that long.
Well, he'll stick around for at least one more Super Bowl, you would think, considering he doesn't have too much of that really room for error, because again, he'll be doing Super Bowl 59. So we'll see what happens. Joe, you've always had the nicest things to say about Tom Brady. I guess his stuff in the booth will be no different.
I think he'll be fine. Again, he does prepare well. He does stuff. I think I told you this last week in a text somewhere. What bothers me more is how Fox is going to treat him. Every time somebody does something, oh, didn't you do that once? And they're going to show some friggin' highlight from 20 years ago. Or they're going to go, oh, you've won this. And we have here's another Super Bowl winning quarterback as our. And again, he took a guy who was really good, who worked his way into that job, and all these other guys that have done all these lower levels the awful games with Dick Stockton and all these other clowns
Oh my God.
that are
Old
ready
Dick
to
Stockton,
retire.
not young Dick Stockton. Young Dick
Yeah,
Stockton's really
exactly.
good.
Old Dick Stockton that are ready to retire and work their way up to the number one spot, and then he just comes walking in and they give it to him. Again, nobody even knows if he can do it, if he wants to do it. It's the same thing with Sean Payton. He was awful going to the studio. He didn't want to be there. It was just a way to make money on the year off. So you just feel bad for that's the guys I feel bad for, is the guys that do this for a living, that actually went to broadcasting school, or the guys that come out that have worked their way up through the ranks, like Matt Millen and those guys that did it for years before they got to be the number one guy. I still think Phil Simms should be there. I think he's fantastic, and there's no reason to get rid of him from the pregame show or to get rid of him from the thing, other than he only won one Super Bowl, whatever. It's just the way Fox treats these things, and again, I think I said this to you too. It's the Raiders, right? So they're going to fight the NFL. They're going to sue over this. There's going to be a big to do about the whole thing, and they're going to love every second of it, because Mark Davis is just like Al. He wants them to talk about his team. So
Mhm.
this will be another way to bring some light on the Raiders. So
Why you have Minshew as the quarterback, baby? That's the way you get your people talking about you for 2024. I think he'll be.
Ron will be talking about him.
So will Anthony. Anthony is a big. Anthony loves his Minshew mania as much as I do. I think he'll be fine. I think he is going to be seeing what someone like Tony Romo did in his first season and want to top that because he has a very good competitive fire out there. I think he'll be very good. I'm not worried about the restrictions of looking into the game or stuff like that. People can feed him information, and Burkhardt can feed him information, and EA can feed him information, or even other someone else can feed him information. I think that's going to be perfectly fine. And I think he will. I don't think there's going to be moments where we say, hey, why is he on this broadcast? Because if you're honestly watching a broadcast for the color analyst, I feel sorry for you. I love broadcasting stuff.
Hey,
that's
the
all
way
I'm
the
saying.
TV schedule breaks, Rabbi, we may be in situations where we don't have a choice but to watch him.
Well, that's what Red Zone is for. That's all
that's
I'm
what they
going to
made
say.
a volume button for.
That's exactly what they made a volume button
Touche,
for.
Joe. Touche.
But I need it for Chris Collinsworth, and sometimes I need it for other people. In fact, but the thing is, I do think he will live out most of his contract because I think Tom Brady needs to be around the world of football, and maybe his Raider stuff will be there, but he'll only be a 10% owner. He will not be anything more than that. He will be a minority owner. The criticism is obviously the biggest problem of everything because I don't know if he's going to be opinionated and saying something made a really bad call anyway, or a ref made a really bad call. Everybody does that, and so that might be refreshing for him to have to shut his mouth up when it comes to having a bad ref call now and then, and learning that he needs to, fall in line and stuff, or he'll get money suspended for him like everybody else does, like he probably did once or twice as a player.
I'm
I
sure
think he'll be.
I'm sure he's not going to look forward to ownership meetings with Antonio Pierce either. But
Not going to last that long, most likely. He'll just rehire Josh McDaniels. I think what really will be the case, though, that is interesting to me is I think there's a great article out there from The Ringer called How Fox Threw a Tom Brady Hail Mary and Won. I read it beforehand here. And this really all falls back to all of the moving around that happened in 2022, right? In the year of 2022, when Joe Buck and Troy Aikman went to ESPN. Aikman's contract was up. Buck ended up following him because Aikman wanted Romo money, and honestly, he should get Romo money because what Tony Romo is now is a shell of himself compared to the person that you saw in year 1 and 2. And Aikman, as cantankerous as he is actually looking like he has fun because he has the right partner working with him. So once that happened, everybody had to move around. And Fox does go for big names. Anthony actually just posted something out today when it said their promo for their 30th anniversary in 1994 and how it's like, here's the big stars right before the game. We have Bradshaw, we have Howie, we have Jimmy. So as much as a good job that Greg Olsen did, and you know what? Olsen's going to be fine because he'll probably end up going to NBC and succeeding Chris Collinsworth. He's already working with Mike Tirico and Madden. So you might as well have that happen over there. You lose $7 million, by the way, by getting demoted. That's who I really feel the most sorry for in that situation. But once that happened, Fox had to have their white whale. And that's what Tom Brady is. Tom Brady is their white whale. I think Brady will bring eyes. I don't like to say he'll bring eyes. I feel, again, sorry for you if you're going to watch something based on the color commentator, but he'll bring eyes. That's the biggest thing that I think Fox wants in this situation. I think unless he crashes and burns, which is always a possibility considering the world of social media, again, wants Tom Brady to fail. We always need to see Tom Brady fail at something. And that's exactly why I think this will be an interesting situation. We won't talk about this, though, in 2 months. Let's just say that. We won't even talk about it in 1.
I'll also add this, and people forget, Troy Aikman started on the number 2 team.
Only for 1 year. It was only for 1 year.
Miller, yeah, his first year. And he was only bumped up to the number 1 team because John Madden moved over to ABC and Pat Summerall retired full time. So people kind of forget that. I mean,
it was Dick Stockton and Moose Johnston, by the way, not Dick Stockton.
No, Moose, Daryl Johnson. So yes, so yeah, I mean, it's a big shoes to jump in. You're automatically the number 1 analyst guy, whether in some cases working your way up. So yeah, it's going to be like I said, Tom Brady is going to be judged literally by every sentence that he says on the air. It's something. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles the criticism, as far as how he takes it game by game as far as improving his skills and building on it from one game to the next. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. Obviously, I worked in TV, and obviously we've done the show. It's a process. You build your way up little by little to where you feel comfortable the most. I think being in and being surrounding him with the production crew he's gonna have, and obviously Kevin Brokaw being one of the better play-by-play guys, they're gonna do a good job of making him put him in the most comfortable spots to where he can play off the play-by-play guy and pretty much bring his own unique take to each game.
So, Anthony, to follow a theme of the evening from earlier segments, so what you're saying is they're going to give Brady a good pocket where he can feel confident about dropping back and llooking downfield to push the ball?
Well, you know Tom Brady can't run whatsoever, so yeah, you're gonna give him some time to find his receivers and push the ball downfield.
There we go. Rabbi, I want to know from you on Monday just how much ink awful announcing spills on Brady's first game.
Awful announcing spills ink on everything. So honestly,
no, but I want to know how much they spilled just on Brady.
We'll see what happens. Anyway, let's finally, as we do on all season previews, let's look into our crystal ball and see the future that takes us to February 9th, 2025, just like it will for Tom Brady on the broadcasting side, over to New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. Will the Chiefs make it 3 in a row in the AFC and possibly 3 Super Bowls in a row, which has never happened before? Or will someone new conquer the Chiefs dynasty? Will one of the NFC East stalwart picks like the Eagles, the Cowboys, or the Niners make it over the hump finally? Or is someone like the Lions ready to start their new roles as favorites with another step? Joe, you're up.
Lions, Chiefs.
Anthony?
Oh wow! You know what? I was watching last night on YouTube, NFL Throwback, one of my favorite YouTube channels.
Love it, love it.
There's a video that shows just how difficult it is to 3P. By the way, shout out to the 1990 Giants for being 3P busters, beating the 49ers. But besides the point, it's a tall order, and there's a reason why it's never been done, because it is so difficult to do it 3 years in a row. And I don't see the Kansas City Chiefs doing it for a third time. It's just very hard. The players get older, schemes get more predictable, and also just everything has to fall in your direction to get back a second time, let alone a third time. I just don't see the Chiefs doing it. My pick is going to be the Lions out of the NFC. I do feel like Dan Campbell's coaching with gaps in the NFC title game last year, he'll learn from them. I.e., kick some damn field goals when you're on the road. In the AFC, I do see Lamar Jackson and the Ravens finally getting over the hump. It's almost like they're knocking on the door, and they had plenty of opportunities to beat the Chiefs at home last year, and they didn't shoot themselves in the foot continuously in the second half. I think these are the two teams that get to the Super Bowl, and we'll see them on February 9th.
They just did it again, by the way. They just got their 6th illegal formation penalty on a 3rd down.
Dang.
Wound up having
Dang. 4
6.
times basically on the first drive too. But we can talk about that at a later date.
On a different day.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I guess it's my turn.
Yeah, it is. You're number
right. For the AFC, I'm gonna completely go the opposite way from Anthony. I'm taking the Chiefs. I said it last year, and I'll keep saying it as long as Patrick Mahomes is the Chiefs starting quarterback. The AFC goes through Arrowhead, though the Chiefs proved they could win on the road in the postseason last year. And I don't see anyone in the conference who is solid enough on both sides of the ball to be able to take them down. They had concerns about their wide receiver room aside from Rashee Rice, who had 79 catches for 938 yards and a team high 7 touchdowns last year. So what do? They go out and they sign Marquise Brown in free agency. They move up to draft Xavier Worthy, who had 75 catches for over 1,000 yards last season at the University of Texas, ran a 4.2140 at the combine, started his first NFL game tonight, scored on a touchdown on a reverse, showcasing that speed. After cut day, they welcome back Juju Smith-Schuster, who should return to his previous role as a chain-moving possession receiver who eats up zone coverages. Steve Spagnuolo lost one major piece of his Super Bowl winning defense. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed was traded to the Titans, and as yet, no one has seized the position opposite Trent McDuffie, who's played well tonight. That being said, 4th-round safety Jaden Hicks has the making of an impact player, and unlike last year, game-wrecking pass rusher Chris Jones had a full camp and is in the lineup starting with Game 1. I know there's never been a three-peat Super Bowl winner, but if any team has a chance, it's Kansas City. On the NFC side, I'm taking the 49ers. This one was really tough to pick. There are plenty of good teams in the NFC, and I normally shy away from picking the Super Bowl loser to get back to the big game the next season, since it's only happened 7 times. And the Cowboys in 1970 and 71 and the Patriots in 2017 and 2018 are the only teams to return and win the year after they lost. But now that both wide receiver Brandon Ayuk and left tackle Trent Williams have resolved their contract issues and returned to practice this week in advance of the season opener against the Jets on Monday Night Football, Kyle Shanahan has all of his weapons at his disposal. Yes, Ayuk and Williams, along with AP Offensive Player of the Year running back Christian McCaffrey, who's returning from a calf injury, will need some ramp-up time. But if quarterback Brock Purdy, tight end George Kittle, and wide receiver Deebo Samuel play like the back of their football cards, the offense will be fine in the short term. And the defense returns stalwarts Nick Bosa up front, linebacker Fred Warner in the middle, and a deep secondary led by cornerback Travarius Ward and 2022 All-Pro safety Talanoa Hufnaga. The free agent acquisition of Leonard Floyd, who they'll use to bookend with Bosa after a 10.5 sack season in Buffalo, will only improve things. I was tempted to go with Detroit, and I may very well regret not taking them. But San Francisco has more players with proven resumes, so I'm going out on a limb and breaking one of my rules and taking the 49ers.
Wow, going out. Only somebody can say the words "going out on a limb" for picking a rematch from the Super Bowl from the previous year, which has.
And it's usually me.
Yeah, which happens from Dallas, which was Dallas Buffalo. That was the last time we had a 2 Super Bowl in a row matchup, same 2 teams. All right, I'm gonna go contrary. I'm gonna go with the pick I have the most confidence with. I think the Packers in the NFC. I think the best thing that the Packers do is get their young quarterbacks get the most out of their young quarterbacks quickly. Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl in his 3rd year. This is Jordan Love's 2nd year in starting. And even though he doesn't have a proven number 1 guy, he has a lot of good 2 and 3 guys out there. With the addition of Josh Jacobs in the backfield and a team that really hit its stride at the end of the year, playing in the NFC North division, I think they will be the team that comes out of the pack. They're going to probably not be the 1 seed. I think Detroit and Chicago are playoff teams too, but I think in the end, that's the team who I trust the most. They should have beaten San Francisco last year in San Francisco. I think Green Bay is going to the Super Bowl in the AFC. In the AFC, I'm going to pick the Bengals. I was going to pick the Chiefs, and I probably will regret not picking the Chiefs because but no team is three-peated, and just because the Chiefs end up losing in the AFC Championship doesn't make it a bad season for most teams. And that's where I think they're going to end up. The only team that has been willing to have the firepower that Kansas City has when healthy is the Bengals. Just like the Packers, this is a tough division. This is a battle-tested division. And I think the Bengals could end up being a 1 or 2 seed and hosting the Chiefs or going to the Chiefs. They've beaten them both ways in times. So as much as I regret not going with the Chiefs and not saying I told you so at the end of the year like you people do, no matter what chalk it is, I think I'm going to go with the Bengals and the Packers. I feel like I made this pick before it got burned. Let's say it burned again.
Hey, Rabbi, when was the last time none of us had the same pick? That's unusual for us. At least 2 of us usually wind up having the same pick, so this is good.
Oh, I was going. That was the team, by the way, I was waffling on. So we wouldn't have had the same pick regardless. Anyway, for our Superman of the Gridiron, Jake Kaplan, Anthony Strait, and Joe Tufaro, who will join me every week for the official review podcast starting this Monday on socials, I am Stephen Rabinowitz, a man who is nothing but a glorified towel boy. YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines is where you can see our vast variety of archives. Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines is where you can see this live. And on Twitter, X, whatever the social name is, Jay.
The handle is at ONTH Sportslines, where you will find a link to this show tomorrow morning when the sun comes up, along with other tidbits of sports-related information we think are worth your time to read. In other football news, from the other football, soccer legend Alex Morgan is calling it a career. She'll play her final game this Sunday for the NWSL San Diego Wave. She leaves the sport as a 2-time World Cup winner, 2-time Olympic medalist, and the 5th leading scorer in U.S. women's national team history with 123 goals. She also made a mark off the pitch, leading the fight for equal pay for the women's national team. Meg Lanahan and Jeff Reuter of The Athletic celebrate one of the best to ever play the game. The link to the story is on our Twitter page, and it is definitely worth your time to read.
And congratulations, too. She's selected baby number 2.
She is indeed.
Everybody sip your tea and say good night on Sports Lines. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.